Welcome to the On Labs podcast and our special guest today, someone I've known for a while and was finally able to drag him onto the show, Konrad Reiche. Konrad, thank you, man, for finding some time to hang out with us today.
Hi. Yes, thank you so much for having me. I was actually really excited when you reached out because honestly, being on a podcast has been my bucket list. So yeah, I'm glad I get the chance to join one.
Oh, yeah. So this is your first podcast. I got you. This is good. This is one you're going to remember, man. You always remember that first podcast, that first talk, that first thing, right? So this is cool. Cool. All right. Give everybody 60 seconds, maybe a little bit more of what you're doing today. Where's Konrad today?
Yeah, where am I today? So today I work at Reddit. Reddit is a platform that's home to thousands of communities focused on conversation. And so whether you're into sports, finance, or just cute animals, there's a community for you. And with a lot of content being posted by users, we need to figure out how to get the right content to the users. And my team, ranking platform team, provides the infrastructure and tools to help ourselves, but also other engineers at Reddit to build products that solve this challenge. And we have a framework for writing ranking pipelines that generate, filter, and sort content. And we also manage data stores with various indexes, but most importantly, also caching, just so that all of that can happen in a timely manner. And my role as a staff engineer is really a lot of my day is spent, at least currently, reviewing code, going over design documents, mentoring my team. And I also work, of course, on roadmap items to improve our platform's capability in the short term, but also thinking about long-term vision, asking questions like, what should the system look like in 1 year from now, 2 years from now? Yeah, I think most importantly, I feel very lucky that I get to do all of this using the Go programming language, which I very much enjoy.
I mean, that site is producing a large amount of content daily, right? I mean, is that part of some of the problem space you have to deal with? How you're managing that much content, and are you saving all that content into eternity, or does that content just have a lifespan and then that's it?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and we do process everything, and it all also stays on the platform. So, and that very much speaks to the problems you face when you look at ranking problems or looking at generating called candidates in the machine learning space. And so, candidate can be like a post or something else you might want to recommend, and generally the first place where you optimize things when you serve it is, let's say you want to recommend something to a user and they are as different sources that you can recommend from. Maybe they're subscribed to a certain community, then maybe there are similar communities. And if you already pull too many posts into the process and maybe now you're moving around tens of thousands of entities, things get very slow. So you kind of have to make sure that you're already picking sort of the right candidates from the start, filter really out what you don't need very quickly. That is really what makes it, what makes these recommendations or really these APIs respond in a timely manner. But yeah, if we're just looking at total content, yeah, it stays around and it's quite a lot.
I guess I would imagine you're also having to start thinking, just like the Googles of the world, how you're going to sort of mix up I guess I'll call it keyword search to these now LLM based sort of systems, right? Because there are times where I think the keyword search is really what you want. You don't really want some large language model doing things, but in other cases you do. So I think I haven't thought about that type of engineering yet, but I imagine you're a search platform, really, right? You're a content generation. Let me find some stuff too. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's also different ways this is applied. Like we are, I think what's also unique is the platform as such. We started out as having just one service that focuses on ranking, but now we pretty much turned the repository that drives that code into a monorepo so that other teams can also launch their own ranking services out of that repository. And so with that, we have different customers internally, other teams that have their own unique ranking products as well. And yeah, searches, for example, also one application of that. Um,
all right, so we're gonna come back to this at the end here, but we're gonna jump into the time machine. So I always got some initial questions, but um, just to sort of age you a bit, um, what year was it when you finished sort of your last year of I'm going to call it high school? First, where did you grow up, and then kind of what year was it? What year was it when you had to make the decision about university? Because school systems are different all over the planet.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Berlin, Germany. Actually, specifically East Berlin, which is interesting because East Berlin as a place like this doesn't exist anymore. Now it's just Berlin. And I graduated high school 2008, and that's also the year when I started to go to university.
So that means when you were born, it was post wall going down, 2008.
Yeah,
Yeah, it had to
yeah,
be right because that was like
yeah,
87.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I was born just before the wall came down.
When you're a kid, anyway, you don't really know. I imagine your parents didn't make a big thing of it. So, I mean, like, when did you? How old were you? Do you think when you realized you were in the actual middle of some incredibly major history growing up there? Like, when do you realize that? Is it in high school? Is it junior high? Is it? I'm just curious, right? I didn't grow up with any of that around me.
I think that's a really great question. I would say, to be honest, I would say in my 20s, because growing up, it's just you don't know anything different. And then as you get older and as you are also exposed to other countries' histories, as you reflect more, yeah, I would say the older I get, the more I look back, the more I realize how unique this was as well.
Do you ever think? Yeah. So in your 20s, which I I wonder if that is a. I think that's a good thing in general. That it wasn't there in your face all the time. You just lived your. It felt like you just lived a normal life, and you weren't really in the middle of all of that. Up right. So I think that's amazing. I think it's a testament to your parents. Do you ever? Do you ever think? I think I would have thought at this point, at least in my life, I would have been like, man, imagine that didn't happen because then I really would have been on the I don't want to say the wrong side of the wall, but I would have been on the wrong side of the wall. Do you ever have those thoughts, like how different your life could have been?
Yeah, I do think so. I don't have a great idea of what my life would have been, but I'm definitely happy about the way I grew up and the things I was exposed to, because I feel like there were interesting values given on either side, and just having been exposed to both just feels to me that it gave me a bigger variety to think about things. life in general. And so I'm grateful for that.
So let's talk about those last 4 years of grade school, like your high school, because those are sort of formative years. And I'm kind of curious what you were sort of doing in those years. Like, what were your big interests? What were you even thinking about at that point too? After sort of high school, were you in sports? Was it music? Like, what was it?
So around high school, I would say there was definitely a transition happening for me from middle school to high school. Whereas in middle school, I was much more drawn back, spend much more time in front of the computer. Whereas in high school, I was more coming out of myself, and yeah, interests included just hanging out with friends a lot, music, going to concerts, but the interest in doing something with the computer also passionately, that very much stuck around also during that.
So what's your first memory of accessing a computer, or for whatever it was? Like, just don't even think hard. Like, what's that first memory that pops in your head?
Yeah, that one is interesting because believe my very first interaction with a computer was at the German Museum for Technology in Berlin. And my grandpa took me there when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And it's funny because you would think a museum is all about historic items, but I think this one was more focused on contemporary exhibits as well, and it was meant to be interactive. They had different terminal computers set up, working in a network. For some people, that is something that they haven't been exposed to yet. And I still remember the terminal had a yellow font and it was a chatbot. So I don't know which year it was exactly. It was in the 90s. And I remember asking it about the weather or how my favorite soccer team at that time would do in future games. And I think currently I think a lot back to that because I think it's ironic just because today in the age of ChatGPT and large language models, and in a way I wasn't too impressed back then because some of the responses started to sound very similar, just like today. Yeah, I think the next memory then pretty much is hanging out maybe at a friend's house or maybe it was in school and interacting with Windows 3.1 and playing SimCity 2000. And then it must have also been around that time that my family got our first computer, which was an Intel Pentium with Windows 95.
Did you ask for that computer, or you just showed up home one day and it was there?
That's a great question. I'm pretty sure I was talking a lot about computers at that time. So if I wasn't asking explicitly, I was asking implicitly.
So you remember that? Do you remember that moment when it was there? And do you have siblings? Like, is this something now you have to share? Was this for you? Was it for the family? Was your parents using it more? Like, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think I was lucky in that sense that I didn't grow up with siblings, and so my parents also weren't very focused on using the computer, so it was very much there for my disposal.
Did you ever ask your parents where they got it? Did they go to the store and buy it? Did he get it? Maybe they got it from work. Did they got it from a friend?
Yeah, that one was from a store. Yeah, there used to be a lot of PC hardware, software stores around in those days, and so they would have readily configured machines that would be sold.
Now, I'm sure you broke that machine at some point. So when you break it, do you tell your parents I broke it, or you fix it?
I was in no way able to fix it myself, but you're you're spot on, because I would go if I wouldn't play a game, then I would go around, mess with the settings. I would go into the file system, maybe delete files I shouldn't have deleted. I still remember one time I broke it, and I don't even know why it would have broken that. But that time it wasn't connected to the internet yet. And in Windows, there was this setup wizard, so like dialogue that you work through, and it was supposed to set up your internet connection. And even though physically it wouldn't have been possible because there are no cables that would have connected it to the internet. As a kid, I was still convinced if I just follow these instructions the right way, maybe I will still be online.
So then, as you're progressing through high school, I think you're doing what normal teenagers do. You're mostly hanging out with your friends at the time. It doesn't sound like you're sort of entrenched in any one particular thing. You just kind of just want your free time and hang out. But at some point, you're going to graduate, and then you've got to make your next choice. So, talk about that time when, whether you liked it or not, you've got to make some sort of choices for what's happening to Konrad after high school.
So that was actually very easy for me because I think it must have been 7th or 8th grade. I already put my sight on, I want to study computer science. That was almost set in stone to me, which made things pretty easy. Made it very easy for me, at least in the high school years.
But why? Why? Tell me why. Tell me why. I'm going to interrupt you at times just to, because something's important there. Like, why computer science? I know you had the computer and you were playing with it, but I don't feel like you were heads down with it. So, like, what did your parents do for a living? What are maybe other people around you doing for work? Like, why this?
Yeah, that I mean, I don't have. I'm actually not sure, but I think I just from an early age on felt like that when I would sit in front of the computer, I could express myself. I could work in a creative way. Could do the things I could imagine. I think when I was still when I got my first computer, I don't think it was clear to me that my work would be specifically with computers. I would maybe imagine just computer as a tool. So maybe I would think maybe I would become an architect or I would work in a bank. But I think the older I got, the more I realized, no, I want to work with the computer, but also do something for the computer. I think that just very much persisted.
Was money involved at all? Did you ever have in the back of your head? I've got a couple kids where one of them, she's young, okay? I mean, she's like 13. So, but it's the first time I've had a kid like this where it's like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And the answer is just, I want to make money, right? It's not, I want to be this, I want to be that. I just want to make money, right? And it's mind blowing to me. I don't know if it's a generational thing or just, I don't know what it is, but were you thinking, I know when I got my first job or went to school for, it wasn't really, I felt like I could make a career out of it, but it wasn't my number one priority. I just wanted to work with computers. So was that this kind of the same for you? Just wanted to work with computers?
Yeah, very much, because back when I made that decision, or I thought at least this is what I want to do, this must have been around maybe 2000, 2001. And at least in Germany, I think becoming a programmer, like software developer, it was the job was paid well, but it was also not necessarily it didn't compare as much to jobs that you would have picked back then if you wanted a job that pays a lot of money. So it was really not, that didn't really play a role. And I do believe I would have also pursued it if it would have paid less, because I just felt I feel passionate about this, and this seems more important than what it will pay, at least at that time.
I feel a little bit, I could be wrong, so correct me, that in Europe, um, high salary in general, this is an in general question for everybody. I mean, statement for everybody's listening, but correct me that in general, the high salaries don't tend to be the highest priority for people. That you want to live comfortably and you want to be able to do the things you want to do, but your time, sort of your freedom with time, is more important than money in general. Is that right or wrong? Or
I would absolutely agree. And I think especially after having moved to the US and also sometimes going back, I can tell the difference immediately. And even when I just spent some time back in Berlin, back in Europe for a couple of weeks, you can also tell that your priorities start to change again, sudden, just based on your surroundings. That speaks to that as well.
I don't know where it comes from, but and I hate it, by the way. It's not anything I enjoy being in. But in the US, it's like money is, when you use the word success in the US, it's immediately tied to financial gain. Like success, if you say I'm successful, and then the first question is, well, how much money do you make? It's like, no, no, I'm not successful because I make X amount of money. I'm successful because I have a family that loves me and I've got time and right, and I can put milk on it. You know what I'm saying? And it drives me crazy in the US. It drives me. I love that aspect of Europe, that it's, um, that the kind of priority is different. So that's kind of cool. Everybody listening, right? When I was younger, I worked as many hours as I could to be quote unquote successful, to get to the next salary raise, to make enough. Now I had 5 kids, and that was expensive. So I put a real priority on that. I think it's, people would say, well, it's real convenient for you now, Bill, to change your priority because now you're making enough money where you can make that choice. And they're absolutely right, right? Like, um, once you have money, it's easier to say that money's not important.
Yeah, I agree. And to be fair, also things in Europe are also changing. So I would say the way you had to not care as much about it in the past is also not true anymore today. So things are also shifting slightly there as well.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I mean, I've always thought of Europe because of the healthcare alone, right? Like the amount of money I have to spend a month on healthcare where I don't even see a doctor is insane compared to saying. So sometimes I'm like, maybe it's ignorant. I'm like, baby, when we retire, let's just go move to Europe because that's just going to save me so much money on healthcare.
I think it's the interesting part there as well is it's not just the total amount of money spent, but also what you have to worry about. Or the big difference is being exposed to universal healthcare means you don't really have to think about it. It just doesn't concern you in most cases. And I think not having that type of stress at all.
It sounds like then you were you already determined that you wanted to do something in and related to computers, computer science. So that's what you're going to do. So explain what the next step then is, at least in Germany/Berlin, for you to go to university. I imagine you got to take a test and you got to get a certain score and you got to do certain. Is that how that works there?
So back then it was the middle and high schools were divided into different types of middle and high schools. So depending what your path is, whether you wanted to study or you wanted to become a trainee and learn a trade, you would go to different schools. And so, which can was a little bit unfair, maybe also at that time, because essentially after or like around sixth grade, you already need to decide: you want to study? Do you want to learn a trade? And I think it put a lot of kids back then also on a not so fair.
Well, I imagine at that point your parents are making that decision. So if your parents were in a trade, you probably moved towards. in general, again, uh, especially if you have to decide that early. Is there a stigma, let's say even at that time, because there's this ridiculous stigma in the US that if you go into a trade that you are somehow less than somebody that goes to college, which to me is, especially when you want to mark success as financial, where all of these trades people today can make much more money than somebody who goes to university and sits at a desk every day. But is that same stigma kind of in Europe, or at least at the time?
I would say it felt a little bit like this, but also I I I almost feel like, yeah, it comes very much down to who you talk to and what those people think, and especially as a kid, it's all about, well, what do the adults think and what do they expose you to? Do they expose you to different way of thinking about these things? But I I think I felt lucky in that there was very little judgment in my family on what I wanted to pursue. So they were very open about that, and generally feels very good because you don't really want to. Ideally, you can just you think of something that you feel like you like, and then you get the support for that. And if you have that, then it can only be successful.
Yeah, no, I love that. My two boys didn't go to university. One, it took him a couple years to figure out what he wanted to do, and they're young, right? He's like going to be 22, and decided now he's going to learn the profession of being an electrician. And I'm all for it, man. I'm like, college is not the only path, right? As long as you're being productive.
And there's a big trend. It seems like in especially in the US, more and more younger people do go that path because they don't want to be in debt, getting a degree, and yeah, the work is needed, and people that are good can actually uh, charge.
Kind of, I told him, if you just show up, when you say you're going to show up, you can already start billing $100 an hour to fix anything, and people will pay it because you showed up. If you're just reliable, you can start charging $120 an hour. I had to pay a company here in Miami $150 an hour to show up and feel like I was getting the job done, because if I paid less than that, it might be great. It may not show up. And it's just mind blowing, right? It's just mind blowing. All right, so you're going to go to university. You're kind of already being trained for that in an early age. So a lot of your high school then, are you learning programming and stuff in high school? Or you're doing hardware, software throughout high school?
Yeah, we did had computer science as a class, and then you could also elect it as could elect advanced classes. So I did that. We did some programming there, but also had generally good exposure to some general computer science concepts like sorting algorithms, history of computer science.
What about math? You must have been doing a lot of, you get as high as like a calculus, a calc 2 or something, even in high school?
Yes, yeah, it's definitely there's a lot of, so from what I understand, what lots of people here in the US learn in the beginning in college for I think you pick a general classes or a general education in college here in the US. And so a lot of that you're already close to in Germany for your high school diploma. And also I had 13th classes, so it was 1 year longer. Now it's also just 12 in Germany.
Well, the child number 6 is already taking some advanced math classes at the university while she's in high school. She just finished her junior year, but she was and it's all online, which is good, right? But she's already taking some like 100 level college classes. I had her take philosophy too, because I told her just open up. I thought she's an avid reader, so I thought she'd love the philosophy, but she wanted to kind of get a head start on the math. So, but it also goes towards your high school credit. So you get college and high school. And that I think is good. I don't think you should be doing it where you lose your life, because I've met kids that all they're doing is like, by the time they almost graduate high school, they have an associate's degree already. And I'm like, no, you got to be a kid too, right? You need time to be a kid.
No, I agree. It's important, and there's more to life than just specializing.
So what university did you end up going to?
So I ended up going to a university called Freie Universität Berlin. So it translates to Free University Berlin. It was, funnily enough, built by the Americans after the Second World War, and yeah, they had a really good computer science program, and that's also where I applied to get a spot in. I There was another sort of like private but still subsidized university I applied to. Was founded by the SAP founder, and so they had could get a degree there, also specialized for software engineering. So I was also interested in doing that right away, but didn't get a spot there. So went to study at Free University Berlin.
Right. So you're talking like 2009 at this point. There even seems today to be a really nice sort of uh, tech community in Berlin today. It sounds almost like there was even back there in 2009.
I do think so. It was less so from what I remember just when I started, because I do very vividly remember the years when just the startup scene was started to boom again in the US and San Francisco, and I do remember there wasn't as much some of these things around at that time than they are today in Berlin, for example. But I think things were happening.
Is this like a traditional sort of 4 year program at university where you end up with a bachelor's of science or arts, or is that what you're entering into?
Yeah, it's so typically it's 3 years bachelor, and then you can do a master's. That's 2 years, and many of us did both bachelor and masters because just a couple of years prior we didn't have that system yet, and so most people would get a diploma, and it would take you 5 to 6 years to get that diploma. So there wasn't really a distinction prior, but when I started studying, you could yeah, have that choice to stop after 3 years, for example.
So do you end up you still living at home when you're doing university, or are you finally in a position, because you have to then I'm assuming get a job. It's but when do you get out of the house and start really living on your own?
So I was very eager to move out. I just wanted to be my own person, and also wanted to, because we're living a little bit further on the outskirts of Berlin, and I just wanted to be in the city, wanted to be where it's all happening. And yeah, I was eager to move out after graduating from high school, and that's also what I did. And that was a good choice, because I did I also needed a lot of focus time to for my studies, and I might not have been able to get that at home. So
So how did you afford that? You and a few friends found a flat, or how does that work?
yeah, I was looking at flat shares initially as well, and in that case, you would, if you don't have friends that also want to like find an apartment with you, you can also just look online and find there's a free room available. But then I did end up finding a small like studio apartment in Berlin, and it was financed partially late, because the state would also give you a monthly loan if the income of your parents would fall into a certain bracket, and that was the case. And so you get that loan. It's an interest-free loan, so and it's also capped out. So that's something I had to start repaying once I got my first job, or like a couple of years afterwards. But it's a very lenient loan, like no interest, capped.
And that's what you use that to live on, to pay rent and pay some food. Do you remember the first night you slept in this apartment? That had to be magical, right? Remember that first night? And you're like, this is my space. No more parents telling me what to do. Let's go grab a beer.
I mean, it was it was bliss, to be honest. It was bliss.
I think everybody remembers that. But for me, and I would say for my kids at least, your first experience living outside of your childhood home is usually in a dorm room, right? It's like that stepping stone. So you're around a lot of your peers, and I'm not going to call it adult supervision because the RA is usually just 2 years older than you. But it sounds like you skip that, right? You move right into a sort of an apartment, which doesn't happen for kids in the US usually to their second or third year of university.
Yeah, and I think I mean, on the one hand, I feel very lucky about that. But I think it's also important to go through that phase where you have to share space, and I think it can also be incredibly useful to be around your peers all the time. I think that's important, especially when you're studying. I did get to experience living in a flat share later on, so it is something I had to catch up on. It wasn't quite easy, but I'm also happy about that experience too, because
Well, you appreciate having your own space a little bit more the moment you can afford to do that, right? And all my kids had, at least their first freshman year, had horrible, I'm not going to say horrible, had difficult roommates. So it just gives you more appreciation. All right, let's, two more questions about university here. What was your what was your least favorite and your favorite classes, if you can remember, when you were in university?
a favorite is really difficult because there were just had a lot of really good classes and a lot of really good professors and lecturers who really cared about what they were teaching. I would say what still stuck with me the most is it was algorithm and data structures for concurrent programming. That was a really great class that I enjoyed a lot. My least favorite,
You don't know. You don't have anything. It wasn't. I mean, it could have been a math class.
yeah, now I do remember. So the first year I was struggling really hard with everything. I only had 3 classes and I failed all of them, all exams completely, just failed. And it was quite the adjustment. And I think out of these 3, I dislike the most one. I think it was technical computer science. I think it was like electric engineering, like introduction to electric engineering, something like of physics based knowledge. So
All right, but I don't think it was the classes that you failed. I think you were. I'm going to throw this out there, and you can tell me I'm wrong. You were a mixed level of immaturity with being on your own for the first time, and just taking advantage of that.
yes, I would say so. But I did it. I think it wasn't necessarily that I didn't. I mean, I showed up for all the classes. I took vividly notes. I studied. Also, the exercises throughout the semester were just really difficult. I was really struggling. I could tell after the second semester something happened. Like felt like I started to get elevated a little bit, cognitively speaking. So whatever they did, it did help me to get better at those those things. But also, yeah,
Do you think then it was more that you just weren't prepared to take these types of classes?
a little bit. But I did see my peers were not struggling as much. It was a lot easier for them by putting in a lot less work than I did. So yeah, maybe I wasn't prepared well enough. It was maybe also testament that I only really started to really care about schoolwork at that point, whereas prior in middle school, high school, I didn't really care as much, and I think I had to catch up on that. That's my guess.
I'm shocked that you didn't think about quitting after that. Like, if this is the rest of the next, if the next 5 years are going to be like this is not what I want to do. Did any of that pop into your head at the time?
I I was no, I was very determined. I was frustrated, but I was like, no, I'm gonna deal with this. This is not gonna take me down. I've been waiting for this for so many years now, and I don't care how long it's gonna take, but I'm gonna walk out with a degree here and want to be good at it.
Well, the good thing is they didn't kick you out after that. They gave you another chance.
They do, and it used to be so that they would give you infinite many chances, and this is probably also the reason why they had to reform the system in Germany, because there would be something that you would call, like, in German it's called Langzeitstudent. That means like student that's studying forever, and yeah, there were like people in university that they were in their 10th year.
As your so it sounded like you did your undergraduate work. You jump into your master's work. You're going to do some. What was your master's work all about? Because there you get to pick at least some aspect of the field.
Right. So I pick mostly things around software engineering. So I try to specialize in that field, and then a lot of it was also connected to a research institute called Fraunhofer Institute, and so they provided certain classes on testing, software engineering testing, um, model based programming that relates a little bit to code generation, and then my master thesis I did on open government data.
So, what were you thinking at this point? You're still not working. You're still living off of that loan system. So, as you now finalize your master's degree, it's time to go to work, man. So, where's your head at? Are you applying at that point? Like, where's your head as you're finishing this degree?
So my head was at I wanna live and work abroad, ideally in the US.
Was it? This is we're talking now, like 2014, right?
Yes.
So was it easy? I'm assuming your peers maybe had some of the same thoughts of going to San Francisco, but was this something that you thought was going to be fairly easy to accomplish? That you were going to find a company, they'd pay for your work visa, you'd move to a much more expensive, much more expensive place. Ignorance, I find ignorance is bliss. A lot of the. If I look back in my life and I think about some of the things I did as an adult, I'd be like, no, you're not doing that, right? But ignorance is what allows us to do these things. So, where were your thoughts? Like this was going to happen easily, and I was just no issues, no worries.
That's a great question, because I don't think I've asked myself that yet. What was I thinking? And I thought I think that should be I, I thought it wouldn't happen immediately, but I thought if I put enough time into it, I'll find a company. And yeah, because I also read about other people's stories online, and it worked out for them. And I was really into what I was doing, so why wouldn't they hire me? I'm like this graduate student with zero work experience. Of course, they're gonna like pay for a work visa. yeah, I was ignorant.
Your parents, what were your parents' thoughts? Were they completely supportive? Just go anywhere you want on the planet, do your thing, or I prefer you stay close to home.
I think they would have preferred me to stay closer to home. And also initially, I phrased it more like, "Oh, I want to work and live for a year abroad, and then come back home again." But that evolved very quickly.
How good is your English at this point? Because if you're going to go to the States, work in these tech companies, your English should be pretty good. And we haven't really talked about that. Your English is excellent. Even your accent is doesn't. I've talked to some people where it's really hard to understand the English, right? So your English is excellent. So where does all that come from? Is that German education too?
Thank you. It's German education, but I would say my English was definitely at a different level than when I first moved to an English speaking country. Very very different. That's also testament from one of my old bosses who said after I worked there, they said, yeah, when you arrived here, like we couldn't have the same conversation that we're having now. Way we can converse now, no way. So it was still very different. We had like English, we had certain classes in English in university, and we could converse, but nothing the way it is when you live full time abroad.
Yeah, I find that I think about this because I travel quite a bit all over the planet, and I don't speak a second language, not even Spanish. Being here in Miami, and I feel like either I've gotten really lucky for being born in the U.S. or it's just a privilege to speak English. And I sometimes wonder if the U.S. didn't become the quote unquote superpower that they did, that would I have been really learning another language here? Maybe French, right? Because at some point French was the language everybody spoke in when you didn't know each other's languages. I just find that super fascinating, and I feel really lucky that that I have English at least, right? Because I've tried to learn other languages, man, and I grew up in an Italian household that just spoke Italian, and I don't know, my brain just it doesn't take to it.
Languages are difficult. I mean, it's something that yeah, you kind of have to be thrown into it, forced to learn it.
So, what was the first job then you took out of university? Was it in Berlin while you're waiting to go to the U.S., or you found something?
So after a lot of failed interviews, I got to the point where I was like, I don't care. I need a job, but I know I don't want to take a job in Germany. So I started applying because at first I for sure wanted to become a web developer, full stack type of engineer. I was really into Ruby at that time. So I was like, I want to work with Ruby on Rails. And yeah, none of these jobs worked out. But then I found company called Mixler that was looking for an Android engineer. And I was like, well, I know Java. I know Java really well. I also built a little Android app in the past. Whatever, I'm just going to apply there. They're probably not going to respond. But they did respond. And then I talked to them and online. And then they said, okay, can you like come in like for like 1 or 2 days into our office and do like a trial work day with us?
And that was in Berlin, obviously, right? That was in Berlin.
That was in London.
Oh, in London. Okay. So did they fly you to London at least? They paid for that?
They did, yeah. So I was also very surprised about that as well. Yeah. So that was a great experience. And at first I didn't want to move to the UK because I remember going there as a tourist and I really liked it, but like, oh, I don't know. But then when I went there just for like 2 3 days, I left completely amazed. I was like, yeah, I want to move here.
It's expensive though.
Very expensive, and that that also brings us to the fact that then I had to live with roommates because
How did you find roommates going into London? Other people that worked at this company?
I at that time I found it over Facebook groups that were looking for roommates or looking for people to to rent a place, and that was very scary because there was also lots of scams happening at that point, and there was really not a lot of contact with the people I met online to rent that place, and I had to transfer a lot of my savings to secure the deposit. And I mean, that wouldn't have worked out, then I would have been in a pretty difficult spot.
Well, plus you're moving in with people that you don't know at all. Like that to me is the most. Yes, I mean nobody wants to get scammed. So putting that aside, the fact that you're now committing for what 12 months to live with some people that you don't know at all, that could also be, yeah, what a night. Like it could be, but it sounds like it ended up not being a nightmare, at least that first year.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was definitely an adjustment. Everything's different. So I arrived there with my luggage and moved into a tiny room. My roommates, they were super nice. But yeah, it was an adjustment.
And you don't have that London accent, Conrad. You would think as you're strengthening your English that you'd start to develop a little bit of an accent, but I don't hear it at all.
There are certain words that I will pronounce like British, but it's really mixed. It's all over the place. Yeah.
So how long were you, so you've moved to London, you find a flat, you find some mates. How long are you with this company building Android apps? And now I'm guessing we're still talking 2015.
Yeah, 2014. Yeah, 15 and then 16. So I stayed with the company for 2 years. So first year I developed their Android app, for which there was so far no OS apps.
Okay. So wait, so their product was what? Streaming in 2014-15, streaming video to your phone?
Just audio. So live audio streaming. It focused a lot on music. They would host like online radio stations. Yeah, so a lot really in that space, which I really liked because I was really into music, and I'm also like really into like socially related things, like online socially, and that is exactly that. You join a stream, like you listen to it, you chat with people on that stream, maybe you chat with the host.
It's like iHeartRadio app today almost.
Mm-hmm.
Same sort of okay, so you're there for like 2 years. What what's happening that you transition out of that, and then where do you, cuz now at this point your Java skills, especially on mobile, which are really valuable at the time, are pretty honed, and you're dealing with streaming, which I don't think a lot of people have experience with even now between 14 and 16. So sort of what comes across your desk that you decide you're going to move on?
That's interesting. So I mean, the second year I did focus mostly on web development, Ruby on Rails, also JavaScript front end. I what made me move locations again at that point was actually what's going on in my personal life. So it's related to relationship, and yeah, so that I think triggered the move back to Berlin again. And in a way it was good, because even though maybe what motivated me to do that move didn't work out, it did help me to get into the next job and apply myself with different skills again. Most importantly, it got me to start working with the Go programming language. That turned out to be a good decision.
Right. So now 14. So it's like 2016. Personal reasons you go back to Berlin, and you. What's the name of the company that you end up? And it's Go. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's the company was called Tape TV. So it that at that point it was looking to become a video streaming company, going from audio streaming to video streaming, also focused on music. I mean, I really didn't pick
You had
those
the perfect
companies.
resume for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, they did like that. Yeah, I did had fitting experience.
But your technology stack is changing from basically Java, Ruby to Go.
Yeah, to Go, Kubernetes, Terraform. But interestingly, the most engineers in that company also didn't had a ton of experience in that yet, because they were also starting to change their stack. Was prior also a Ruby shop, so that that was totally fine. They didn't really care about that as much. And
Did you know any Go before you interviewed slash got hired?
I did start to learn Go. I also wrote like my first program in Go. So I did had that, but I think, I mean, yeah, in a way, I actually had more experience than some of the other engineers who started writing Go like for a couple of days. So yeah.
Well, what was your first project when you got hired there? Do you remember?
Yeah, we were working. So we were starting to work on the live streaming stack, and was a multi microservice architecture. And I was working on the service that generates the live streaming playlist. So it gets generated dynamically on the backend, and so that means it needs to generate this manifest that has to be sent out to the client, so the client knows which segment to fetch next.
How was it being back in Berlin? I guess you're. I'm imagining that you lived in the city. You didn't go back into the, we'll call it the suburbs, right? So, did it feel good being back in Berlin, or did you feel like you went backwards because you came back home, or like what were your thoughts on? I know you went for personal reasons, but put that aside for a second, right? You must have these personal, private moments when you're like, I'm glad to be back, or I got to get out of here again.
I think I was definitely framing it for myself as something positive. Maybe the things where, yeah, I didn't really have a lot of negative feelings about it, because I also came back with a different mind. In London, I would explore a lot on the weekends, go to different district areas I haven't seen yet, and this is something I wasn't doing when I was a student in Berlin. And so I came back with this tourist mindset, where I thought, well, actually, I don't think you really know the city. And so I started applying the same thing. I would explore many areas I haven't really spent a lot of time in yet. And so that really helped. And plus, the company was really fun. Everything was just entirely different. It was like a completely new experience to me.
It's funny because I grew up in New York and then I moved to Miami when I was 25, 24, 25. And it wasn't until that move and then going back to New York to visit family that I started doing the tourist things. Like I had never been to the Statue of Liberty. I had never been to the Statue of Liberty until after I moved and then came back. Like you just don't do that in your own city for whatever reason. You don't leverage. I've got the best hotels in the world here in Miami, dude. Like people come from everywhere to stay in these hotels. You know how many of these hotels I've ever stayed in? Like none. And I say it to my wife all the time. I'm like, why are we not leveraging that? You just don't do it, and it's a shame. So I'm really happy that you decided to explore your city properly, because a lot of people won't don't do it.
Yeah, I can only recommend it. It changes a lot. Plus, when friends, family are visiting, now you can be an actual tour guide.
I always thought that I'll retire and then even like in Berlin, right? Learn enough. There's a lot of history to learn. Like you can't do that overnight, but just spend a year learning as much history as you can and then just make that my job. Just walk around the city every day, meet people and talk about it. Like I thought that would be a great.
You'd be great at it. And also, especially in Berlin, you just need to walk down one of the main streets, and just one building after the next. And
Yeah, I'm gonna study the city inside and out. And then I think that would be a fun job. I would love a job like that. I think that would be cool. And I love Berlin, by the way. I mean, we haven't really said it, but It's a city I have to go to every year. And I was just there last week, and the time went so fast. By the time I was on the plane, I looked at my wife and I was like, God, it just went by so fast. I don't even feel like I was in the city this time. It's a bummer. So, so how long are you at this company then?
CTO had to say, yeah, sorry guys, we have to declare bankruptcy first thing in the morning. There's like literally nothing we can do.
I've been there, man. It's a bummer. It's a bummer because you're so excited. You built this thing. It's working. You're ready to. And this was a company that was building physical high end, like $800 physical door locks. And I was working on the services that would allow the door lock to talk to the mobile phones. It was a fun project. And they had people in China for like 4 months, maybe even 6 months working at the manufacturing lines. I learned all that stuff. And then one day to the next, man, the VC decided not to give them their second round. And the whole thing just went. Imagine you were living in China for 4 months, perfecting a manufacturing line, and then told all that time you just spent was for naught.
That's rough. I mean,
but did you feel that at all? Did you feel that at all? Like all that time that you spent building this product that's now not going to see the light of day, not for naught because you learned a lot, but put that aside, right? Just you didn't get to see the fruits of your labor live in the hands of some other person.
yeah, that's true. I mean, we get so far as that we started testing the live streaming with partners for little music gigs in the city, but it didn't become full blown user consumer facing product, and I think that's sad. Yeah, because you kind of want to at least stick around to see like the first couple of iterations land and bring it to the first completion. I mean, these things are never complete, right? But get it to a milestone, really. Yeah, that was sad.
Did they give you any sort of severance to allow you to find the next gig, or were you like overnight also basically poor?
And yeah,
That's lack for a better word.
another privilege in Germany, because there, if you've worked, I forget what the exact requirements are, but the state gives you 3 months of your salary as severance. So
Oh,
yeah,
the government does it.
yeah. So
Right.
you do pay a lot of
Right.
taxes, but then it does fund those things, and so then a given at least.
You know, I had heard of people in Berlin. I can't say Germany, but at least in Berlin, who would work for like a year, maybe 18 months tops, and then take a year off because the government would give them enough money to sort of live their lifestyle on, and then they'd go back and get another job. Is that like, am I saying something that's completely ridiculous or?
No, I mean, I don't know the exact workings, but there is something where you get unemployment benefits that try to match your previous salary for a certain time, and then but then you need to employ it again and work continuously for that time. So it does sound similar to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that fascinating because when I've been fired in my life, I mean, it's just things happen, you know, companies change, management teams. Like I I even remember like you go into a bit of a panic mode, especially when you got kids and a mortgage and all that, because there is nobody going to hand you money unless that company wants to give you severance. And then at some point that severance also runs out. And so I don't know. I never had that. I felt like I never had that safety net, at least in the U.S. So that's another thing um, with Europe, right? Again, it's not eternal, right? But at least you have a little bit of a safety net to maneuver around.
Right. Yeah. What here maybe people will recommend to save up for a rainy day fund, and so seems like in Germany at least that then is given to a degree through what the state can provide.
So I always wondered. In fact, I watched a movie last night called The Company with Ben Affleck, where all these people are getting fired and they're struggling to find work. And I was thinking actually, like, would I be so I'm an American, right? I hate paying taxes. Let's just start there, right? I've been brought up with the idea that you pay the least amount of taxes you possibly can. You pay your taxes, but you do everything you can within the code to find those deductions, right? And people from Europe hearing me say this, I have friends that get mad at me. What do you mean you don't want to pay? I want to pay my taxes. The game is set up where you do everything you can to pay the least amount possible. But I feel like maybe that mentality comes into the US because you don't feel like you ever get anything back for that tax money. Like, I don't get medical, I don't get severance, I don't get this. I don't know where that money goes. At least maybe because I'm young too.
I think people in Europe will feel the same though.
So, but I wonder sometimes, would I be willing to pay more taxes if I knew that I was going to get these social services when I need them? I don't know. I don't have an answer. I haven't been able to answer that for myself. But I think if I felt like that I was going to gain benefit from these taxes directly, it'd probably be easier to swallow. And I don't feel like you feel that in the U.S. I don't. How how long are you at this company then? So you said you're at this company for two. So it's 2000 and let me see, 2009 you graduate. It was 5, it's 14. You had your first job. You're there for 2 years. So it's about 2016, 17 when you go back to Berlin. And you're how long? And then this company doesn't get the funding after what, 2 years? You said
After a year, yeah. So I think it's
after a
like,
year. After a year,
yeah. So we're like in beginning of 2018.
you still haven't gone to the U.S. yet. So what's your plan right now in 2018? You have a little money, so you don't have to panic or rush, but you got great experience. I mean, the streaming stuff is technical stuff. It's lower level stuff. You now have Go under your belt. It's a good time to have Go, I think, in 2018. So, what's your next move?
My next move is to go on the Gopher Slack, the public Gopher Slack, and join the jobs channel, and advertise myself for hire.
And does that work?
I mean, it did work. It did help me find the next connections, and I was very open. I was like, I did know I want to move abroad again, but I was pretty open. I said, I'm looking for jobs like U.S., Canada, Israel, even. Yeah, so I was, wherever, like bring the jobs on, but I knew it had to be Go. was very I was very stern on that. I was like, no, this is too much fun.
So, how long? I'm really excited to hear that story because I remember when we added the jobs channels to Slack, and I still monitor that stuff every once in a while. But to hear a story where that actually helps somebody makes me feel good. So, how long did it kind of take you from the time you started looking, and not just Slack, right, in general, to say getting that first interview? I always tell people, even with the experience that you have, it's 6 to 8 weeks to start the next job. From the time you start looking, from say the time you get the offer letter, it's like 6 to 8 weeks. It is what it is.
I don't fully remember what the exact timelines were. I was definitely a couple of weeks because I was also just trying to see or figure out what I want to do next. Or if I want to like work on like some side projects, maybe put something on my website or so. I'm not sure, but I did I did post there. I did send out applications, and yeah, and then eventually someone reached out to me who was uh, and they were looking for this stealth startup at that time to hire someone, and uh, they they were writing their backend in Go, and yeah, it was like a social network.
Where were they located?
They were located in Menlo Park, California. And so I was like, oh, great.
So this was your opportunity to come to the States. And they, even though they were a stealth startup, they would pay for your visa and all that good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I think that it helped them to get people to bring people on to also just show certain level of diversity that they're bringing into the company. Yeah,
So you moved to California?
I did, yes. So I was working there. It was sort of like a garage style startup. But I mean,
That didn't scare you at all? You just left the big city of Berlin, you left your country, you're on a visa and you're working out of a not a garage style, like really the beginnings of something in California where it's super expensive. None of that like red flagged. None of that red flagged, or you just didn't care because that's where you wanted to be.
I think I just thought, I mean, yeah, it's the US, it's California. What could possibly be wrong about this?
Ignorance, right? Ignorance is bliss. So just give me a moment thinking back on that now. If you could have talked to yourself, and I know everything worked out, but like, just would you be telling yourself right now, or let's say that was your kid? Do you think like it was a little crazy, or you still think it was like fine?
I mean, I would say I just took the next chance. I took the next risk. It wasn't different at all to the previous risks I took to just move to London or just move back again. And I I think if it were my kid, I honestly don't know what I would do. I would probably be like, oh, I'm I'll go there with you. I'm gonna check the place out first.
Well, my point is that I'm sure you, if you look back on it now, you realize um, how potentially unstable that situation was, right? Like, but you're not married, you don't have kids, you're the only person at that point you still have to keep alive is yourself. So that allows you to make those sorts of choices anyway, right?
True. True. That yeah, it's easy to take risk if it's just you.
How long is it an easy process at that point to just get on a plane, or it takes a couple months and you have to work sort of remote?
It does take a couple of months, and so yeah, so there's a process involved with that and getting that all set up. But it as long as there's you have a good immigration lawyer that you delegate it to them, and they will consult you. And once I had that stamp on my passport, I could yeah get on the plane, go there, and uh, start the work.
How many suitcases? You get on the plane with one big suitcase with all your clothes
Yeah,
in it?
pretty much.
Is
Yeah.
that it? Your entire life in a suitcase, praying that it doesn't get lost when you arrive in California.
It does help to move a lot, because I think if you move a lot, you don't tend to acquire that much that you wheeled around.
George Carlton has this, when he was alive, he did a whole stand up comedy kit on this idea of stuff. And he's like, you buy a house just to buy stuff. And then suddenly you've got too much stuff. So now you got to buy a bigger house to have more of your stuff. Right. And it's this whole, I always remembered that in the back of my head. So I'm kind of like you, like, I don't want to acquire stuff because now it's a management maintainable
Yeah,
issue.
we're at the state right now in this apartment. Seems like we've filled it up pretty well now, so it's time to look for a bigger place.
Now you got to watch that. I'm going to find you the link and send it to you, man, so you can just start laughing because you're in that cycle now of I need a bigger place because I need more stuff. So how does that work out? You end up there, you're working with this company and you're in California. You're probably feeling great. This is amazing. I've wanted to do this for the last 10 years. It's 2018. You're there. Um, how long are you with this company? And kind of, 30 seconds, like, what are you doing? Like, what new stuff tech wise are you learning there?
So was around 2 years that I was there. I was working primarily in the back end. I was learning a lot about just how to structure things for a startup at that size, early stage startup. Just learning a lot about like, I mean, not how do you do fundraising, but being exposed to that and listening to the CEO, what he has to do, who he has to invite, who he has to impress to get collect funding. Uh, so yeah, just learned a lot in terms of software engineering from the CTO. Then we also had a math guy, or like a chief scientist officer, if you want. So learned a lot from him.
Did it? So two things, two questions on the startup. You were there for 2 years. So um, I find that when you've got these sort of small startups, the founders, especially early on, start to fight a little bit in front of everybody because the group is too small. So did you see sort of any of that where, they forget that they're in a small room with people that shouldn't be hearing them arguing? I've never been in a startup where I haven't seen that. And then, like, what happens 2 years later? Did you see growth? Did they have to fold? Like,
So I wouldn't say that there were like situations where people were fighting, but you could tell we went through the first year, and for most of the other people, that was the second year. It was very exciting. Everything was just fun. We're like building, we're iterating quickly. We loved our product. Second year, it it started to get tight because you only have so much funding. You're like in the nth iteration of a product that you kind of start to like now, but you still don't really have product market fit yet, or maybe you think you don't.
so now it's 20. We're entering in our world of COVID. You're in one of the most restrictive states in the United States related to COVID in the 2020. So what's your next move at that point? Like, do you decide, does the company, is it just time to go for you? Or are they asking you to go? What's happening?
As- So I think there's just also, I think what aligned was my visa would also expire because it was only valid for so long, and that came to an end. But at the same time, also the funding of the company came to an end, and it was clear there wouldn't be another seed round or a Series A. And at that point, they went to see if acquisition may be less likely, but maybe an acqui-hire. So where a company just ports the entire team over. And at that point, I was back in Berlin again. So I had to pack up my things, move back, and I was sort of observing the process from back home, where I started to do some freelancing for a company of a friend. They needed a Go consultant, so that was perfect. So I worked a little bit on the side during that time. So that was 2019. So still before the pandemic, and then the I mean, yeah, I got lucky again because they were in talks with Reddit at that point, and that's when I interviewed with Reddit because they were doing these acquihire talks. And I still remember when I heard that I would be interviewing with Reddit, I mean, I was so nervous. I was preparing a lot of coding interviews, and I still remember taking the interview from. So I was renting a co-working space at that time, and I think you did these coding interviews back then in blocks, so you had like 4 hours straight off interviews, and I started that at 10 p.m. at night in Berlin from that co-working space, and then at 2 a.m. I was done.
Yeah, because they were based out of California, right? So, and it sounds like you got that gig, so that must have been really exciting for you.
Yes, I was. I mean, I was really, I was so happy because the startup running out of funding, and sort of, yeah, and failing, shutting down was also, it wasn't fun because I had a lot of fun and I didn't want it to end, and I wanted to continue doing the work that I really cared about. And this came around, and it also aligned with that they were also able to get me a visa, and that too worked out. And just the fact that all of that could happen within a really short time felt very privileged, because often these things can take years before it can work out for you.
So then you finally got to San Francisco. You moved back, and you got exactly where you wanted to be. And by the end of 2019, you got into California, San Francisco. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, that was it's pretty much almost exactly 5 years ago now. And yeah, I got back, and this time also, because prior I was living in Menlo Park, and being in Silicon Valley has its own perks, and the weather down there on the peninsula is really nice, but it's not the same as San Francisco. So I was also glad that this time I would be full time in the city.
and you've been there ever since. So you've been there now like 5 years, which is great. And are you living in California right now, or you moved back
I
to your?
do, I do.
You're in California.
Yeah, I'm in San Francisco. Yeah.
Are you thinking at all about getting? Are you allowed to have dual citizenship or Germany? Have you thought about getting an American citizenship since you're there so long?
Yeah, that's definitely the plan. I think, since I do want to stay here, I would like that, because it just gives you more safety all around, and dual citizenship should also not be a problem, thankfully. So yeah,
Have your parents come out to? I'm sure your parents have come out to California at least once
yeah,
since this
they
adventure,
have.
right? I mean, that's completely different for them, right? Like if they show up there, it's a completely different world.
It is very much so, especially, yeah, my mom also doesn't, they don't really travel abroad, and so, yeah, I mean, traveling abroad in Europe is already a thing for itself, but then coming to an entirely different continent, um, so many differences.
A couple last questions here, as we're really out of time here. You've been there 5 years. Are you still in this sort of mode where you're still learning new things every year, and you feel like this is still a company? And I know people there are going to be listening, so it's a tough question to ask. But I mean, 5 years is a long time today for someone to be at a company. And I like when I see that. Uh, what I tend to see happens is if the company's big enough, you can bounce around enough and do new things, and there's no reason to leave. But at some point, um, somebody gets bored. Like I want to do something different, and I just can't do that here. And that's why you move on, not because you're not happy there, but your your brain just wants to work on some different problems. So 5 years is a long time. So just maybe talk a little bit about that. Do you still feel like there's a lot that you can still do and learn? Sort of Reddit or
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because you often tend to ask yourself that question. Maybe, I mean, often after 2 years, especially after 5 years. But interesting, because the company has also grown so much since I joined. You get to grow with the company, if it fits you, and that seems to be what's happening as well. So the code, the foundation, I started there around ranking services. started very small. At first, it was just focusing on an aspect of ranking just a video feed. And then as things were working really well, we started migrating over other feeds, other ranking, other code. And with that, you also had to change how you deal with that. So first you're just a small team, maybe 2 people, 3, it's 5. Now you need to interact with a lot of teams, a lot of cross-functional work. And so with that, just the type of work is changing constantly. In the beginning, maybe I was just coding the whole time. I was writing design documents here and there. And now it's more reverse, and I'm in the position where I have to review other people's work a lot and provide guidance, but also mentor my team. And with that, there's always something new, and then just priority, constantly changing priorities, trying to figure out if we need to shift something. It's always something new, really.
So, last question here. So, if you had to leave Reddit for any reason, and obviously you don't have to, and everything is great over there, so that's has nothing to do. But let's say that you, for whatever reason, it was time to move on. I'm kind of curious what other companies out there are sort of interesting to you. Do you think you'd look at one of the fangs and just step up to the next sort of size company? Would you go back and look for a startup? I'm just kind of curious where your head is, because you got to work on a lot of sort of streaming stuff for the first 3/4 of your sort of career. And now you're working heavy on content stuff, right? You kind of changed industries. And I'm sure your streaming background helped the amount of content that you have. But I'm just kind of curious, if you had to move on, like what companies and or industries would kind of be interesting to you.
I think what all companies I've worked for have in common is the social component. All the streaming things were always related to social interaction, and then the Reddit, as well as prior social networks. So it's a lot about being online communities. I think that is something that will continue to follow me. I always thought that maybe one of the fan companies could be a next great step. These days, I don't know necessarily, because I also feel like I can still get the same growth at Reddit. I don't know what could be next. I do notice, though, I start increasingly develop a passion for code review. And sometimes I find myself seeing that the tools available to do code review efficiently and in a collaborative manner are just not there. So if I could right now, maybe I would like to work on a startup that focuses on that, like that really nails code review in a really great way.
I like that. I can't handle everybody. I do a lot of code review and stuff too, and I'm somebody that has to read code files from top to bottom. I can't handle PRs. If it's simple stuff, dude, I can add a comment there and it's tiny. But other than that, it's overwhelming, because just because you make a change doesn't mean that it's best for the entire file, source code file, right? Or even the function. So I need to read large. I like the VS Code plugin where you can sort of interact with the other person. But if you could tie that in with some of the PR information, maybe that would be super. I use git log minus p all the time just to see the changes, and I pull them down so I could just know where to go.
And that's also my recommendation. Like, my best code reviews always start with checking the code out locally, because the small view that the diff you get, let's say on GitHub, it's just not sufficient. You do need the surrounding, you need the context, and that means often then jumping to code definitions or seeing where it's embedded.
I do. I need it. And some people on my teams hate it because they're like, just leave comments on the PR. And I'm like, I can't, man. It's just, there's too much here. We have to talk. Right. So I'm with you, man. I'd love to see anything you start building in that space because I do think it's important. All right, dude, we are out of time. Konrad, this has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your story with us. If anybody listening to this wants to just reach out, ask you a question, say hi, what's the best way for somebody to reach? We'll put this in the show notes, but what's the best way to reach Konrad?
So you can reach me. You can go to my website. That's konradreiche.com, and there's a contact page. So it'll have my email address or like other places to reach out to me. So yeah, and just say hi.
Perfect. We'll get that. You must be on some Reddit community too, right? Or you don't? Do you work on the like you work on the platform?
I
Do you like
do.
use the platform?
I think increasingly so. I discover more and more places, but yeah, it's not. It's just Reddit is also very focused on pseudonyms. So I have different accounts, almost like different personas. There's one that just posts about maybe video games, one only about Go.
That's cool. We'll get all that stuff in the show notes. So it'll be great. All right. So thank you again. This is Bill Kennedy and Konrad signing off from the On Labs podcast, and we hope to see everybody again real soon.